Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Jennifer Teal, and I wanted to provide you with a quick coding demonstration on using your ICD-10 PCS coding manual to build your procedure codes. The book that I'm showing here is just happens to be the Optum version. There are many versions of the coding manuals out there. This is just the one that I happen to be using, different flavors to the same thing. Just become familiar with whichever version of the code book that you are using, and also make sure that you're using the correct version based on the date of service, right? So I just happen to be using one that is valid. It's the 2024 version, which began October 1st of 23 to September 30th of 24. I'm just using this for demonstration purposes, but you'll always want to use the current version of the coding manual. So on the slide here, I have a couple of coding scenarios that we're just going to walk through to show you how to use your actual physical coding manual. If you're taking a coding certification exam through a HEMA, such as the CCA or the CCS, you will be using your physical copies of the coding manuals, not an electronic encoder. So it's very important that you become familiar with how to use this code book. In the front of the book, in this gray area, is our alphabetic index. With ICD-10 PCS, there is a guideline that says you could actually start directly in the tables. If you are comfortable navigating your way around in the tables and you know where to go, then you can bypass the alphabetic index altogether. As a brand new coder, especially when you're coding from the medical and surgical section, which is the largest section of the code book, I find it a little bit overwhelming to try and code directly from the tables. I always like to start in the alphabetic index. With some of the smaller sections, it might be easier just to jump right to that section if you know you're coding from that specific section versus starting in the index. The nice thing about the index is you really don't need to know what section you're coding from because it will lead you to the correct section. So the point of the alphabetic index is to get us to the correct table. And remember, you need the first 3 characters of the PCS code in order to find the correct table. So your table, those are what follow the alphabetic index. So all of the colored pages are the tables, and they are arranged alphanumerically. So I'm going to show you as I flip through the top of the page here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. It's a little bit fuzzy. So as I flip through, you can see the characters at the top corner, okay? And I said that these are arranged alphanumerically, but it starts first with all of your numbers. So 0. It goes 0 through 9 in order, and then A through Z in order, okay? So you'll see all of your zeros, and it'll go 0, 0, then it'll go 0, 1, and then it'll go 0, 2, 0, 3, and so on. And then it'll just keep doing that first numerically, 0 through 9, and then alphabetically A through Z. So, like, for example, this is 0 to B. If I needed a 0 to S, for example, I would just keep going until I find the S's, because they come after. So QRS, and there we have the S's on this side of the page here, 0 to S through 0 to Z. So this is a span of what tables are on that particular page. So that's how you easily navigate around. So we start in our index, and it's alphabetically. Our main terms are in bold font, and they're always flush left. And then our subterms are indented below that. And there's this gray bar that runs along the page that kind of helps you follow your eye. So like alteration has all kinds of subterms. I can just jump alphabetically of what is being altered. So we have buttocks, chest, ear, elbow, and I can just jump to the main terms and skip all these subterms until I find my correct main term just by following the line. So the layout of the alphabetic index is the same as it is in your ICD-10 CM diagnosis coding manual. So those that are familiar with the diagnosis side of coding, the index is laid out very similar. The difference is your main terms. You know, your main terms are not conditions. In ICD-10 CM, it's all diagnosis coding. In ICD-10 PCS, it's all procedure coding. So our main terms are usually going to be our root operation. So either a root operation, so then the name of the actual root operation, or you can sometimes look up the name of the actual procedure. So the procedure name. So like acupuncture is a procedure name. Alteration is a root operation. And sometimes there's more than one way to look it up. And so abdominoplasty, that's the actual procedure name. That's what they would call it in the medical record. But we have to figure out, okay, they did an abdominoplasty, but what is my root operation? And so sometimes by looking up the name of the procedure, it will help me narrow down my root operations, because for this particular one, abdominoplasty, it's giving me only 3 options. So it has narrowed it down for me to either alteration, repair, or supplement, depending on what the objective of the procedure is. So I would look at my scenario. I would see, are they doing an alteration? Are they doing a repair? Or are they supplementing with something? And that's how I would narrow down to which root operation I need. So that's how you use the alphabetic index. And then again, you're going to go to the tables to finish building your code. Most of the time, the index is only going to give you a few characters. It has to give you at least 3, because that's what we need to get to the table. So you'll always get a minimum of 3 characters. So these ones I'm pointing to here are 3 characters. But you'll also notice that sometimes I get 4 characters. Sometimes I might get a full 7 characters like here. Now with the full 7 characters, you always want to verify your code in the tables. And we say that the same thing we say, always verify in the tabular list with your diagnosis coding, always verify in the tables with your procedure coding. You never code from the index. You always verify in the tabular section. And what we call the tabular section for this particular book is our tables, okay? So with that being said, let's just walk through a couple scenarios. And our first scenario is shown on the slide here, and we have a percutaneous excisional biopsy of the liver. And as coders, we have to learn how to parse out the details we need in the diagnostic or procedural statement, or the op note, or the medical record. So wherever we're coding from, we have to learn how to parse out the specific details in order to complete the coding process. With ICD-10 PCS, we need to know our root operation. We need to know what body part is being operated on, and we need to know the approach. How did they get to the location that they're performing the procedure in? So those are some of the key details we have to be able to pick out of the statement or the scenario so that we can build our code. Percutaneous tells me my approach, right? Biopsy, that's going to help when it comes to a qualifier, because I know that whenever they do a biopsy, it's going to be considered a diagnostic as the qualifier. And then I have my, the biopsy is of the liver. So the liver is my body part. So with an excisional biopsy, I have to figure out what is my root operation. So my root operation is going to be excision, because they're removing a portion of a body part. They're removing a piece of the liver. So that's going to be excision. So I'm going to start in my index, and I'm going to look for the E's. So if I just thumb through here until I find excision, okay, so let's go to excision, and the beginning of excision starts right here. So as you see, excision, and then I have all my subterms. And what they're doing the excision on is the liver. So my subterm is usually going to be the specific body part. So excision, liver. So here's A's, and I can see here, I'm still under A's. You see artery has a lot. So this is where that gray bar comes in handy, because I can skip over all these types of arteries and just go, well, it's not an artery I'm looking for. It's not an atrium. It's not a bone. Whatever. So you just keep going and follow that bar alphabetically until you get to, in our case, liver. Okay. So we're looking for excision of the liver. So here we have a joint. It's not a joint. Then we have kidney. And here we have liver right there. So excision of the liver, 0, FB, 0. It gives me those first 4 characters. Now remember, ICD-10 PCS does not use the letter O. No I's, no O's in PCS so that you don't get them confused with the numbers 0 and 1. But get in the habit of maybe putting this little crossbar in your zeros so that you remember that they're the number 0 and not the letter O, because you don't want to mix up your characters. So what do? I write these 4 characters down on some scratch paper so I know where I'm going to in the tables. 0FB0. 0FB, that's what I need to get to the table, those first 3 characters. And then that other 0 at the end, that's going to give me my character selection for my 4th character. So when I get to the actual table, there are columns for characters 4, 5, 6, and 7. And this has given me my 4th character already, my body part. 4th character is always your body part. 0FB0. So let's go ahead and flip, and we're looking for 0F. So where I turned is just 0Bs, so that's not far enough. I'm looking for 0F. So I'm going to flip through here. HIJKLMNOP, so that's too far. EF, there's C's, I'm almost there. There's my F's. I'm looking for 0FB. This is W, so I've gone too far still. I'm looking for B, 0FB. Okay, so this page has 0FB through 0FC. Now, a couple tips about the tables. Your first 3 characters of the table are always listed at the top. So 0FB, your first 3 characters. Pay attention to the 3rd character, that is your root operation, okay? And the book always gives you the definition of it right at the top of the table. This is a good way for you to verify that you are using the correct root operation. Does this definition fit the scenario you're coding? Definition: cutting out or off without replacement a portion of a body part. Well, they did a biopsy of the liver, so they are cutting out a portion of the liver. And then this additional explanation is helpful as well, because it says the qualifier diagnostic is used to identify excision procedures that are biopsies. So remember, I mentioned that a moment ago, that when they're telling me they did a biopsy, I know that that's going to come in handy when it comes to my qualifier. And you can see this diagnostic option in the qualifier column. So the index gave us 0FB0. So 0 is our body part. And you see down here, this is a different table, 0FC. So I want to stay in my right table. And I also remember, when you're coding an ICD-10 PCS and you're building your code, and what we mean by building our code is selecting all of the additional characters. All of your characters must come from the same row. So characters 4 through 7 have to come from the same row. Now, in this case, column 6 and 7 have the same choices all the way across, okay? So the difference is going to be in our character 4 and 5. And once we figured out that we're needing a liver biopsy, and they didn't specify right lobe or left lobe, that's how we ended up with just the 0. That's what the index gave us. So we know we're going to be coding from this row, okay? We don't have these other body parts, so these other rows are not applicable, okay? And what this means is that if I'm doing a liver biopsy, I should never be picking this character 8 here for my approach via natural or artificial opening. That does not apply to a liver biopsy, which is why it is not listed up here with liver as my body part. So I can't jump rows. I can't say, oh, it's a liver biopsy and this is the approach. Those two are not in the same row. Doesn't make sense to code it that way. So you can never, jump rows. All of your choices must come from the same row. So I have a liver biopsy, and they said it was a percutaneous excisional biopsy. So I know that my fifth character is percutaneous. And then I have no option here for device. So it's going to be a Z by default. And then because it's a biopsy, I'm going to select X for diagnostic. And so what do I end up with as my code? I'm going to write it right here. I'm going to end up with 0 F B 0. So that was the first 4 characters the table gave us. So there's the 0. And then I want percutaneous approach 3. And I want no device. That's my Z right there, no device. And I want diagnostic X. That's my code. Now, if I want to not mix up my 2's and my Z's, I might put a little bar right there so I remember that that's a Z when I'm writing it out. And that's going to be important so that you don't mix up your characters, okay? 0 FB 0 3 ZX. That is my full code. ICD-10 PCS codes must always be a full 7 characters, no more, no less. Always a full 7 characters. And that means you have to choose a character from every single column in the table. So this is a table. Sometimes tables will continue on the next page, so pay attention to that. Let me see if I can find an example real quick. It's always going to be like in red writing, depending on what version of the book you have. So here's a good example right here. 0 PP continued on the next page. So what that means is this is not a complete table. This is only part of the table. And as a coder, what you want to do before you build your code is you want to review the entire table so that you know what you're dealing with. And you can see in this table, some of our character values for our body part are repeated in more than one row. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, it's in both of these rows. And so in a case like that, how do I figure out what row I need to be coding from? I have to go to the next column and see, well, the difference here is our approach. So this is the only row that has external approach. And then this row has open, percutaneous, and percutaneous endoscopic. So I would usually decide right then and there, then, okay, based on my operative approach, now I know which row I need to be coding from. It was hypothetically, it was an open approach. Therefore, I know, okay, this is the row I'm going to be in. I have a sternum, I have open approach. I can't get to that down here because this is only external. So sometimes when you're dealing with the same body part character in more than one row, you might have to look at this part of the table and see where the differences are. Maybe it's the device that's different. And if I know my device, that might help me determine which row I need to be coding from. But remember, all your character values have to come from a single row. Stay in your lane, only code from that row. So again, this was an example showing you that it's continued on the next page. So if I were to just stop right here, then I would miss that, oh, look, I have the same body part values here, C, D, F, that were at the bottom of this page. C, D, F, right? So same body parts. I need to figure out which row, that row or that row. So some tables are continued on the next page. So just keep that in mind. So that was just a quick example of how to do our code building process for that percutaneous excisional biopsy, and also the details that you're going to pick out of the scenario in order to get to the right information for your code. And I know there's a little bit of a shadow on the page there, but I'm not able to get that to go away. I do apologize for that. So our next one is cystoscopy with an intraluminal dilation of bladder neck stricture. Now, in that scenario, there are a couple things that, again, as a coder, I would parse out in order to build my code. So one of them, and let me see if I can get my little pen out here and just show you. So cystoscopy. So that oscopy part right here is what tells me that's going to be part of my operative approach, because I know that oscopy means that they used some kind of a scope. So that's going to be the endoscopic. So we got to figure out, is it going to be percutaneous endoscopic or via natural or artificial opening endoscopic? So that's what that cystoscopy tells me. And so cystoscopy, because I know they're doing it in the bladder, I know that's going to be via a natural artificial opening because that's how they insert the cystoscope. And so that's what that piece tells me. Dilation tells me what they're doing, the objective of the procedure. They're trying to open up that stricture. So that is my root operation. And then bladder neck, that is my body part. So this is what is important with ICD-10 PCS coding. You have to be able to pick out these little details in order to know what I'm going to select when I get over here to the table, you know, all of my little character values and also where to start in the index. So remember, you usually start with your root operation. So I'm going to start with dilation. That's what I'm going to start with, dilation. And then what is being dilated? Bladder neck. So body part is usually going to be your subterm. So this body part, that's my subterm. So dilation, bladder neck. Let's take a look and see. Back to the index. We're going to look for dilation. And again, remember the top of your pages, that's going to help you navigate your way around. So I'm looking for the D's. I'm looking for dilation, DI. Dilation. Where do we have dilation? Right. And if you're like me and your eyes are, your vision is going, sometimes I have to use a magnifying glass. So don't feel bad if you have to do that, okay? So here I have where dilation starts. And again, up at the top of my page, also there's a little indicator depending on what the main term is that the page ends with. So this ends with dilation. That's what's reflected up here is what ends on the page. So I'm going to go to the beginning of dilation. And now I'm looking for bladder neck. That's what's being dilated. Dilation. And then we have the A's. And I'm looking for bladder neck. So the A's are in this column. And I'm going to keep up here. Artery. We got a lot of arteries. Artery. You see artery continues over here. And then we go down here, bladder. Now notice there's a difference, bladder and bladder neck. So pay attention that you don't just stop at the very first thing you see, because bladder neck is a little more specific than bladder. And you see that fourth character is different. So it would lead you to the wrong place if you just stopped right at bladder. You're going to, your code is going to be different and it's going to be incorrect. You want the bladder neck. That's what our scenario says. Dilation of bladder neck, more specific body part. So on your scratch paper, write down 0T7C. 0T7C. So it gave us 4 characters. Now we're looking for 0T7. Remember, the first 3 characters get us to the table. So 0T, I'm at 0 C's, 0 N's, 0 P's, Q, R, 0 T. I need 0 T7. I'm at 0 T9, so I went a little too far. 0 T1 to 0 T2. So right here, 0 T5 to 0 T8. It said 0 T7C. So when we're looking for our table, we're going to look for the first 3 characters up here. This table is 0 T5. This table, 0 T7. That's the one we're looking for. And the difference is the root operation. This one is for destruction. This one is for dilation. And remember I said, always check your definition. So dilation means expanding an orifice or the lumen of a tubular body part. It's the bladder neck that they're dilating. So this fits. And then it told us 0 T7C. So it gave us our 4th character. And in this case, you'll notice that this is a different table, 0T8. So I only have one row in this table. So a table can be just one row or it can be multiple rows. This is one row, okay? So all my characters are just going to come from this row. 0T7, C for bladder neck, okay? And then pay attention here that some of these terms here are helpful because maybe the documentation was a little bit more specific, okay? Maybe they said prostatic urethra, and this lets me know that yes, that falls under this and I am in the right place. This is the trigone of the bladder, and it's telling me that even though they used that more specific term in the medical record, that does fall under bladder. So, pay attention to these little additional terms because that will help you kind of verify that you're in the right place. And you can also use the body part keys that's in the appendices. So here we have bladder neck. And then what did it say? It said cystoscopy. So that is via natural or artificial opening, endoscopic, because they're going to go in through the urethra. That's how they do a cystoscope. And so we're going to do a 0T7, C, 8 for via natural or artificial opening. And then there was no indication that they used any kind of device. And then no qualifier. It was just an intraluminal dilation of the bladder, but devices have to be left in at the conclusion of the procedure in order for you to code a device. So it's an intraluminal dilation, but they didn't leave in like an intraluminal stent. That would be an intraluminal device, okay? So pay attention to those details and don't say, oh, well, they said intraluminal, so it must be a device. No, that's just how they dilated it. Devices have to remain in. So our code in this case is going to be 0T7, C, because remember C was for the bladder neck, and then we did via natural or artificial opening endoscopic, so that is an 8, and then we have no device, Z, no qualifier, Z. No device, no qualifier. And that's our final code for this procedure. 0T7C8ZZ. Always a full 7 characters. So that one sentence in our scenario provided us a lot of information. And as coders, that's what we have to do is figure out how to parse out that. And that's where your knowledge of anatomy and your knowledge of medical terminology comes in handy. And if you didn't know how a cystoscopy was performed, then go ahead and do a little bit of extra research. Get out there and look it up and see, well, what is a cystoscopy? And that will help you learn what some of these procedures are. And if you understand how the procedure is performed, that might answer some of the questions for you in terms of things like your approach. So let's do one more for demonstration purposes. We have surgical removal of the entire sigmoid colon via abdominal incision. And so in this case, what does that tell us? So entire sigmoid colon, okay, we have removal. Removal can mean excision or it might mean resection. So remember, the difference between those two is whether they take all of a body part or some of a body part out. Now they said the entire sigmoid colon. So that would be all of a body part, which means our root operation is going to be resection because they are removing the entire sigmoid colon. The other thing that I have here is via abdominal incision. So that's my operative approach. My operative approach is going to be open because they cut them open to reach the site of the procedure. So we have, oops, my slide advanced. Sorry about that. We have removal of the entire sigmoid colon via abdominal incision. So I know I've got a resection. My body part is sigmoid colon, and my approach is open. Those are the 3 pieces of information that I was able to take away from that statement. Okay, so Let's start with resection. And before I do that, one little thing that I want to mention is that when they say in the definition, all of a body part or some of a body part, the body part they're referring to is however the body part is described by the body part character, not necessarily what we know a body part to be in our anatomy classes. So each one of these characters represents a separate and distinct body part. So for example, in this table, they have bladder neck as its own body part. So if I was doing an excision of the bladder neck and I took out all of the bladder neck, that is a body part. And because they took all of that body part out, it would be a resection. Versus they didn't take all the bladder out, but because bladder neck has its own body part value, that's what they're referring to when they say all of a body part or some of a body part. It's the body part value as defined by ICD-10 PCS. So that's just one little caveat for you. So back to our scenario. We have resection of the sigmoid colon. So back to the index we go. Okay. We're looking for, let me move my book around a little bit. We're looking for resection element. And I'm already here in repair, so I just need to go to resection. Element OPQRS for resection. There's resection, and it was the sigmoid colon. Now, again, sometimes there's more than one way to look things up. So I'm under reposition. Where did my resection go? Way down here. It starts right here. This is the beginning of resection. I'm in the A's. If I try to look for sigmoid colon, so I'm under resection joint, resection muscle, element OPQRS, sigmoid, there is no entry for sigmoid colon. Notice that. So resection as my main term, and then sigmoid doesn't get me anywhere. So sigmoid is just the descriptor for the portion of the colon that was resected. So let's try colon because sigmoid is not an entry. So I got to go back to C's. K, resection I, here's my C's, A, B, C, resection colon. So when I go under colon, now I have the specific parts of the colon: ascending, descending, sigmoid, and transverse. Our scenario says the entire sigmoid colon. So on your scratch paper, you're going to write down 0, D, T, N. It gives me my first 4 characters for resection of the colon, sigmoid colon, 0, D, T, N. So we're going to go look for the table that is 0DT. Remember, those first 3 characters gets me the table. Okay, so back to our tables. I'm looking for 0DT. Here's 0DW, U. Here's my 0DT. Resection, cutting out or off without replacement all of a body part. And here's how it defines the various body parts in this table. So if it took out all or some of either of these, that's what determines if it's going to be a resection versus an excision. So if they took out all of the upper esophagus, that's a resection because upper esophagus has its own body part value, okay? So again, it's the body part as defined by ICD-10 PCS. Now, our index told us our 4th character value was an N. And where is our N? Our N is right here, sigmoid colon. And you always want to check to make sure that that body part value is not in more than one row. And in this case, it's not. There's no indicator that this table is continued because remember, that would be down here. So this is the full table and our N is right here, sigmoid colon. And so what's nice is that the index gave us our first 4 characters. And then you could see that character 6 and 7, I don't have any options other than Z by default. So the only decision I need to make when I get to this table is right here. is my approach, because the index told me 0DTN for sigmoid colon. And I know that there's no device or no qualifier because I have no options for that. So all I need to do to complete my code is figure out my operative approach. And they said it was done via an abdominal incision, so I have an open approach. So I only had one decision to make when I got to the tables. So I'm going to say 0D T, and then we had N for sigmoid colon. We've got an open approach, so that's a 0, and then no device, no qualifier, Z, Z. 0DTN 0ZZ. That is our complete code. So that was just a quick demonstration on how to build your codes using your physical coding manual. I hope you found that helpful, and I appreciate your time and attention with this video. And with that, I'm going to wish you happy coding.